Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Zactivist Speaks. We are really excited to have joining us all the way from Columbia, Missouri, right? We're in Columbia, Missouri, right? Like that's where we are. The leadership panel, some leadership experts here. We have Dr. Hirsch. Did I say it right? Dr. Hirsch,
Correct.
as well as Mike, right? Like Mike, this is Mike joining us from the Missouri Goodwill's Excel Center. And we're going to talk about what they do that's a little bit different than what maybe you have happened in your state or your county that has really been able to transform opportunities for young people and adults in general who maybe didn't receive what they thought they would receive from educational opportunities and educational access. So we're going to start right off. I want you guys to tell us, either one of you, tell us kind of in your own terms, what is the Excel Center and what do you do for learners?
Well, so the Excel Center is a program that was originally started in Indiana by Goodwill Education Initiative. And we serve adults in Missouri who are over 21 that dropped out of high school and would now like to complete their high school education with a traditional standard diploma rather than a general equivalency degree. So we offer seated classes that are credit bearing that students take in order to get a diploma. And rather than having them prepare for and take like the high set exam and help them prepare for whatever their next steps might be post graduation. That's a nutshell. You're muted.
So when you say, so this is a program for adults. Is there what is the lowest age? What is your youngest participant?
For us, it's 21 in Missouri. Some of the other states who run the program run them as charter schools rather than nonprofit private schools, and their age limit might be lower, and in some cases as low as 16 or 18.
What is your maximum age?
We don't have one. I think our oldest student to date was 81.
That is what I read, right? So when you go to the Excel Center's website, I'm going to bring this back up one more time. When you go to their website, you will see a variety of things, including the benefits of having a high school diploma. And that's going to be my next question to you guys as well. And we're going to talk also about the value of education in 2022. But one thing that I read that stood out to me was this beautiful profile of an 81-year-old grandmother and how she had completed her degree. So this is something that goes for anyone. Anyone who is out there who has not got a high school diploma can get that diploma. What makes this program or what makes your high school diploma more valuable than having the GED for your learners? Why would they say, I'll do this program that is more labor intensive in terms of time commitment and more structured as opposed to going and just getting my GED?
Mike, you want to give it a go?
Sure. The diploma for us is just half the goal. An opportunity to come in and get live instruction is overwhelming. It's incredibly brave on the part of our adult students who are enrolled here. You have to keep in mind they've been out of the classroom for 30, 40, 50 years. So to say the least, they're nervous. They're scared to death after the first day or two, but I love by the end of the week, the first part of the following week, they are excited. They have ambitious goals, and we start working with them immediately about identifying what those goals are and keeping them inspired, not only to get that piece of paper that they've coveted for 40, 50 years, but to really start thinking about how that piece of paper can open doors for them, doors they never thought would be possibly open. And we are really focused now on getting folks into industry recognized credentials. We have students here in Columbia that went out. They're now doing phlebotomy. We have 911 emergency dispatchers. We have folks going into industry and trades. We have some of our students have went into junior colleges and four-year colleges. Not only are they enrolled, but they're on the honor roll on a regular basis. And it's just incredibly excited to see the second part of that journey take place after they receive the diploma. So we're only halfway there when they get that diploma.
Yeah, absolutely. So we like to say that we want them to consider this the first step rather than the last step in their educational journey. And historically, what the research says from the Department of Labor is that over your lifetime, you will earn more with a standard diploma than you will with a GED. And we know that there are hiring managers who make sort of immediate decisions based on the type of high school education you have, whether or not they're going to move you forward or look at your resume, for example. We also have a number of students for whom studying independently for very stressful, large-scale tests has not been successful. That a combination of not having direct instruction and having the anxiety of test taking has not been successful for them. So many of them have tried high-set programs and found that they need more structure and more direct instruction than what they can get at some of their local AEL kind of programs.
And one thing like that stands out to me is that many times, I think it's like a misconception sometimes, right? Like as someone who's spent, like you guys, 17 years in education, in the field, I think it's sometimes a misconception that, school doesn't work for kids, but they're able to go out here and pick up the book, the GED, independently study, master all this material, and then go in there and take a test. If it was that easy, then secondary education probably wouldn't exist. So for many of our learners, once they haven't been successful for whatever reason or have made a choice that the traditional educational route that, our society tells you to tackle, and they haven't been successful doing that, many times, they're not going to be successful at that without some type of intervention and some type of help. And it seems as though the Excellence Center provides that. What really surprised me when I was doing my research about what you guys offer and really thinking about how this could benefit so many other states, so many other locations, is that in addition to providing your learners with the coursework that they have, as Mike said, you also provide life coaching. What does this life coaching look like? And either one of you can just tell me about it, or both of you can tell us about it.
Sure.
I'll jump in from our perspective. Your traditional high school counselor focuses on academics primarily in the public school setting. Our life coaches, that's just one little tidbit of their day. A lot of their focus is on trying to remove barriers. Life happens for our adults. The car breaks down, the car gets repossessed. In some cases, they're homeless. They don't have food. They don't have electricity. So our life coaches on a daily basis work with a multitude of other agencies within the community to try to reach out and help those particular students tackle all of those barriers, to remove them so that they then can indeed focus on coming here to school and working towards getting their diploma. And every day has new obstacles and new barriers to overcome. And it's incredibly rewarding to see and know that you're making a difference in the lives of those adults.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so when we look at workforce development programs in adult education, we find that a lot of our students and a lot of eligible students experience barriers that they may not have additional coping mechanisms for that are going to help them change their circumstances. So we provide daycare. Their life coaches are going to help them complete that paperwork and make sure that they can bring their children when they're in class. We want to mitigate some of the things that have prevented them from making changes. And a lot of times I feel like our life coaches are as much cheerleaders as anything else. They're focused on encouraging our students, helping them recognize that they do have the potential, and providing them with some coaching in coping mechanisms and capacity they haven't had before around soft skills like time management, presentation, professional speech. How do I ask for help in a way that is going to get me the result I'm looking for? What do I do if I become angry when I'm frustrated because I don't understand, so that I can stay in a classroom and an environment in a positive way? And giving them those kinds of skills and opportunities to have someone that really help them make some different choices.
So Tiffany wanted to know, for your life coaches, do they have a special certification or training that allows them to really be able to do this? Because that what both of you just said, that's a large order, right? That's a lot of work, and it's non-traditional work. Like, that's not what our counselors who are trained for the K-12 space, that's not what they're trained to do. And working with adult trauma that is then, or these really hard adult issues, right? So, you're dealing with adult trauma in many cases for our learners that you guys are probably having. In addition to that, you're dealing with the adult problems that we all face. And so that's a totally different type of skill set. So what training is required, or do they have, that lets them do this job? Because I'm thinking that's a tough job.
That it is a tough job, and I admire all of our life coaches immensely. We do not require state certification as a guidance counselor in a K through 12 setting for the position. There are some individuals who've had some of that experience, either as teachers or counselors, and they found that valuable because they also do scheduling and graduation audits and some of those more kind of typical guidance tasks. But most of our life coaches have more experience on the social work side. So they've been job coaches in vocational rehabilitation programs, or they are licensed counselors for drug recovery programs, for ex-addicts. They are former POs or individuals who've worked in other social service organizations as social workers and case managers. So most of the people who we have had in those positions have a background that leans more towards mental health and adults who are struggling in some way and need social services support than in the K through 12 kind of traditional guidance world.
And so, I think that's really impressive, because I think, because you speak to when you were saying that, I'm thinking of all the people that I know who would be phenomenal in that work, whether they work in religious spaces, nonprofit organizations. As you said, you have police officers, people that have a true passion and calling to help people transform their lives. And that's what motivated them to get into a service industry in the first place. But they may not be able to actually do that work in what they're employed to do because of the other functions of that job. So it's really great that you guys are providing that space for people to be able to do that. How are you doing, Dr. Washington? So glad that you could join us. Keep the questions coming. This is a beautiful program that I'm really happy to share with everybody. My next question, because I was also really impressed. I think it's really important, right? Lydia says, I love the idea of this program. So grateful for the work that you do. Do you have any partnerships with colleges to help your students after graduation? Yeah, Lydia, you jump into the end of the interview, because that's definitely a question I also had. But, Lydia was trained to critically think by the best, or, one of the people who would like to, I don't know, was the best, maybe, I don't know if it's Lydia. So that's a great question, Lydia. But it's a great time to go right to it. What do you do? And Mike, you said some of this. If you could just kind of reiterate some of it maybe for us about the apprenticeships that you have and how you're giving some, training while they're in the program for post-program success. But how does that work, and how do you facilitate that?
That's a good question, Zach. We are just now delving into the apprenticeship programs. We had our first graduate complete a pre-apprenticeship program. This was actually for a cabinet maker. So this young man was wrapping up all of his academic requirements he needed from the Excel Center. He was shy 1.5 elective credits. But at the same time, he wanted to go into fine cabinetry, which is hard to get into. So we convinced the owner to become a registered apprenticeship, and he did. So when our student went through this program, he obviously took care of all the seat time he needed to get his 1.5 units of elective credit. But more importantly, he gained about a half a dozen different certificates, anything from Ocean 10 to basic operation of safety equipment to then working various types of tools, electronic tools, hand tools, and just, I think this is week 12. He's already on stage 2 of this apprenticeship, and he's going to become a full-time employee. And that's the best part of the apprenticeships. These students that we get into the programs, they're getting paid while they learn a trade. And this is not just a trade, it's a career. And in his case, this is something he wants to do for the rest of his life, and he'll have an opportunity to advance himself. So that was our first one. We have since then reached out to several other companies and businesses. I think the sky's the limit when it comes to opportunities. And, the flip side of that is, from an employer's perspective, they get to train the individual right then and there. They know what type of an employee they're at. So it's a lifetime opportunity for both the business and the student in this case.
Yeah. And so every location in Missouri, we have 4, does things a little differently based on what's available locally. Apprenticeship programs and pre-apprenticeships in general are sponsored by the Department of Labor at the federal level, and then supported at the state level, because we are considered primarily a workforce development program, and that's also our primary funding source. And so they have been pushing in Missouri a lot of opportunities to expand apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship programs. But in addition to that, we also have MOUs, articulation agreements, with community colleges or local colleges in all 4 locations, so that we can offer dual credit courses on our campus for students. So in St. Louis right now, the St. Louis Community College offers a course they call Smart Start. That's sort of their freshman seminar for incoming students. And we're able to offer that on our campus for our students in St. Louis as a dual credit course, so that the students who are interested in pursuing additional college through St. Louis Community College can get a jump start on that. The students who are interested in going to another college will still walk away with a transcript that shows capacity to be successful at the college level. In addition to that, we've really worked in each of the locations to find different programs locally that are training opportunities for students to become certified phlebotomists, pharmacy technicians, certified medical assistants, EMT, 911 dispatch. We have some people who are interested in culinary and a number of other things. And so we have our agreements with a number of those programs to allow our students to enroll in the coursework and be dual enrolled in that coursework so that it counts as high school elective credits and as the coursework. And then because the certification requires that they have their high school diploma, they take the exam to actually complete the certification after they finished their diploma with us. So they can sort of double dip in that way, where they can get the support that we offer on the life coaching side and assistance with things like computers, or space to work with us, and have that be part of their high school diploma, but at the same time meeting the requirements for the program by postponing their taking of that certification exam to after graduation. And the other thing that I think is really important is the ways in which we have been developing certifications on site. So a number of our sites offer a customer service certification as part of our sort of senior seminar course. So it's a fairly minor certification, but it does sort of force our students to learn how to study for certifications, to think really about customer service in a very pragmatic way. We also offer Microsoft Office system certifications for PowerPoint, Outlook, Word, Excel, etc., that students can work their way through if they have an interest and some proclivity in that area. And we are continuing to look for opportunities to expand both our on-site offerings and the dual enrollment opportunities that we can offer. So in a couple of locations, we have found that we are not adequately serving our ELL population the way we would like to. And so we're looking at partnering with local organizations who provide English language learning classes and developing a course that's a sort of prerequisite for enrolling with us that says, yes, you are prepared for the academic demands of an accelerated high school program, but that if they can show completion of that course, they enroll and get credit, high school credit for elective credit for that course starting out with us.
So now I have a million questions, because in the statements that you guys just made, I have a million questions to ask, right? But I'm going to try to now like scope my brain. Question number one is really based on what you just said, which is, so do you guys have the flexibility and freedom to kind of create the type of program that you know will benefit your students? So as you realize you need apprenticeship programs and certifications in advanced cabinetry or decorative cabinetry, are you able to then create that space in your program for those kids? When you realize, or those learners, they're not kids, those adults, those learners, when you realize that you need to have something that's going to ensure that that our language speakers are able to be successful, can you create that?
Yeah, to a large degree, we can. We definitely have guidelines we have to follow. So we have to meet the same requirements that the Department of Ed has for any other schools in the state as far as graduation goes. And so, but within that, we also have a lot of opportunities. We don't always have unlimited resources around, say, hiring extra staff, right? So we have to maybe think creatively about partnering with other organizations, but we can say, and we have developed processes of our own to say, for example, for the majority of our adults who are not pursuing additional college, algebra, maybe that isn't exactly the hill we want to die on. Maybe we want to look at the possibility of offering financial algebra as an alternative for our students who are heading into professional settings. So we offer an essays course that's sort of a similar to Composition 1, and we offer a business writing class that is focused on things like how to write a good email and a memo and an infographic. And
That's
as long as we can demonstrate we're meeting the state standards for that content area, we can create whatever classes we want.
I'm always, one thing, guys, right? That's the thing that keeps me most focused in terms of my futuristic thought is, if I could set a whole new curriculum path for the world, right, for our children, I'm oftentimes thinking about how things like math in general should change, and how it needs to be way more personalized to what people or young people may really want to do. And that may help us not lose so many in the process of high school. And when you think about the math that I use, right, I'm not saying that algebra, geometry, and trigonometry weren't very valuable. They absolutely are, because it builds up a type of critical thinking that I know I needed. But I'd spend way more time looking at analytics and statistics as an adult than I do anything related to algebra and geometry. So that's really great that you guys are thinking outside the box and determining ways of making coursework that's going to master the standards, but also give your learners what they really, really need. You talked about funding. That was the second of the three things that I thought about. And don't even forget customer service is very important to bring up too. When you talk about the funding, because you were saying you may not get more funding to bring in more people, how are you funded? Because for many programs like this, the funding always comes second to other funding priorities. Our states and people that fund are focused on, of course, K-12 education, pre-K education. Sometimes they're focused on, our two-year colleges and our college systems, but rarely are they focused on putting money where education has fallen short or not succeeded. How does the funding work for you, and what do you need from the greater community to support you?
Well, and so this is different in each of the states that have Excel centers. And I'll let Mike maybe talk a little bit about Missouri and say that in the original program, what was started in Indiana, it started by Goodwill. All of the Goodwill Excel Centers are trademarked and sponsored through the Goodwill Education Initiative. Every state that hosts those programs has gone through a legislative process specific to their state. And so most of the states have gone the charter school route and are charter schools in their state. In Indiana, they're local charter schools and they follow the same charter rules as the other charter schools in the state. DC is also a charter school, same thing. For Memphis, some schools are primarily funded through that. There are Arkansas, Little Rock, their school is entirely Goodwill funded from within. So whatever, revenue streams or donations that that local Goodwill organization has, they are entirely self-funded and they're not getting outside funding. Missouri is a whole different game. Mike, do you want to try to explain our Missouri funding?
I'll give you a generic overview. And we were the last of the 4 schools to get up and running in Missouri. St. Louis, Springfield, and Poplar actually started a year before us. But back in 2017, the MERS Goodwill out of St. Louis met with their lobbyist. And after taking a look at some of the other Excel centers nationwide, knew there was a group of people in Missouri that we weren't servicing. And there was an opportunity there to do more. So kudos to the CEO at that time, Dave Kuchbach, and our superintendent, Mark Ahrens, who is now the CEO of MERS Goodwill. They had the vision to go and ask. So in our case, we receive $2.5 million from the annual budget for the state of Missouri. This was originally to assist in setting up the 4 high schools. Additionally, as we have moved through, we're able to bill for those students that are enrolled at our schools that receive assistance through SNAP and TANF, with a lot of our adults being below the poverty level. So we're able to get assistance there. We also, from our corporation, MERS Goodwill, get funding from them. And then we have been very creative on reaching out to other state level agencies to help us help our students. For example, in Columbia, we were able to take advantage of a WIOA program that assisted and provided our students that traveled, say, 20 miles or further coming to school. They actually were able to get completely reimbursed 100% of all of their mileage. We offer incentives to our students. We give them gas cards if they meet a 75% weekly attendance. We try to do anything and everything we can to reduce those barriers because, it's challenging enough to commit that block of time to come back and get your education, let alone deal with $4 or $5 gallon gas. And right now, that's been our biggest barrier. That's our biggest hurdle to overcome.
And I'll say, one of the things that's unique in Missouri is that we don't get any Department of Education funding. So pretty much every other state has gone a route where they are somewhat, they're more traditionally K through 12. They're falling under the Department of Ed for their state in ways that we don't. So we're private nonprofit, and our legislation in Missouri allows us to operate serving only students who are 21 and over. And we're, I think, technically fall under the Department of Labor rather than the Department of Education. And so that creates space for a lot of innovation and also maybe some limitations sometimes in terms of how we can connect to existing educational services. And it does change very much the landscape for requirements around special education services, around English language learner services, because our students have aged out of free public school in our state. And so that really, really kind of, it changes the perspective a lot.
And so, because you talked about childcare assistance and transportation assistance and gas assistance. And so that's a lot of support, which I know requires a lot of funding. And I'm going to go to Lydia's question, and she wanted to know about, like, the level of interest that people may have in the fine arts. Are you guys providing and supporting that also in the work? But before so think on that, answer that. But I also want to talk about, you mentioned customer service, and so every student gets a certification in customer service.
It depends on the location, but the majority of our students in Springfield and St. Louis now take the course. Not all of them take and pass the certification test. That is not required to pass the class, because we do have students for whom it's a helpful thing to go through, but that's just not where they want to spend their energy. The other two locations, Poplar Bluff and Columbia, Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, have not started offering it as a regular part of their kind of community, but they may at some point start to do so. They certainly have the option.
And Lydia was like this beautiful soprano voice, right? Just a stunning creative. But I'm gonna tell you, for somebody who can't carry a tune, but goes and patronizes a number of places in customer service, I want every American to have customer service training. I don't care if you pass the test or not. I want you to have some customer service training. It will make everybody's life a whole lot better. And as someone who has taken a full, as a central office educator, my school system required all of us to take a full day of customer service training so that we could be in support of our schools and our principals and the teachers that we served. We had to go through a full day, and it was horrible. It was grueling. It was like, what? This is so, like, why am I learning this? This is common sense. You're wasting my time. But I didn't say that because I went through customer service training. So I sat there and knew how to manage my emotions. I knew how to manage my emotions. But what about your learners who are coming there to get there or complete this diploma, who do have an interest in the fine arts? Is there any way that they get any support or connection to the greater community as well?
Yes. So one of the graduation requirements in Missouri is a full credit of fine arts. So we offer an intro to theater course that is performance and analysis based, as well as an intro to technical theater course that is really focused on backstage, makeup design, lighting, sound, blocking, etc., the history of stage. We offer a music appreciation class that allows students who may or may not play instruments to really explore music across different eras. And then we offer an art and culture class that is really about the exploration of art, of identity through art, and how culture winds up represented in art in our communities. And we have found that those classes are very, very valuable for a lot of our students. They really love them, even when they necessarily credit any elective credit. You're still muted.
And Lydia's sitting here with a college degree saying, she's also inspired for, Lydia, when I first, Mike says, come on. When I first heard about it, Lydia, I don't know if it's time for you to enroll, but it may be time for you and the husband to move to Missouri and then serve in the center, because I'm certain that you guys are always needing talent. And that's my next question. As we're looking at a time when so many Americans in the workforce are pursuing other fields or other things beyond education, are you finding it hard to keep and retain your talent?
Yes and no. Mike?
Ours, it's kind of an interesting beginning. Let me tell you that and back up, because this is about as non-traditional as you get. I was hired in July. I started the first week of July 3 years ago with no teachers, no school, no students. We were supposed to open our doors in October, so July. So I started calling several of my colleagues that I knew that had also retired in recent years and had some success there, and then did some begging and so on and so forth. But I just kept thinking 30-year career in education, that's not really how it's supposed to work. You have a lot of things in place, but we didn't. So we literally took a leap of faith. So our staff came together by the end of July. we spent August traveling to the other 3 schools, asking all kinds of questions from the teachers. And then probably even more important, we were able to visit with the students. And then we spent September recruiting, going around, putting up flyers in the laundromat, the jail, the courthouse, doing radio ads, anything and everything we could. And then we started enrollment the second half of September. And lo and behold, we opened our doors in October for our first term 3 years ago, but we had to do it in 5 makeshift classrooms on the basement level while construction crews tore this building apart and created our brand new school. And we got to move into our brand new school in January. We were in here for a whopping 8 weeks, and lo and behold, COVID hits and the whole world shuts down, and we had to figure out how to become gurus of online and train not only our teachers, but our students. But since then, I will tell you, Zach, that by and large, our teachers love coming here to work. They're excited. So I don't have that much of an issue with having to replace teachers on a regular basis. And the very first faculty meeting we had 3 years ago, and I tell this story all the time, at the end of the first week, I said, wow, what do you guys think about that? Isn't that incredible, giving these adults a second chance? And I had a teacher that stood up, and she's still with me to this day. And she said, no, Mike, it's not just a second chance for them. This is a second chance for us. We get to do what we love, and nobody stands in our way. So I guess a roundabout question is, we haven't had a lot of turnover here.
We haven't. We've had remarkably stable staffs at all 4 locations. The majority of our teachers are full-time in the locations. They're still small, so anywhere as little as 4 up to 11 full-time teachers. And the majority of them are either early in their career or are retired. And what we found, we do have a little bit of turnover happening in St. Louis now for the first time, really. And we're not getting as many applications as we might have anticipated given the general climate. I think because burnout is burnout, and also because as private nonprofit institutions, we're not going to pay competitively with the suburban districts that are the highest paying in our area. So there are benefits, and we do really work hard to sell those, but it is very different. Our classes meet 4 days a week rather than 5. Teachers have about 90 minutes for tutoring, meetings, and planning at the end of the day, Monday through Thursday. Friday is reserved for tutoring, meetings, and planning. But we also operate on an 8-week or 9-week term, and we run 5 terms a year. So we have 6 weeks of vacation a year, 3 in the summer, one at spring break and 2 at Christmas. That's a little different than a traditional calendar. There are pros and cons around all of that I think require somebody who's really determined to stay in education, but also comfortable with something that is going to feel and pace substantially differently from what they've experienced in the past.
One thing, like this again, a lot of questions, but I'm gonna, temper it because we're approaching the 45-minute mark. I don't want to go over time, but one thing that also, how were you able to open a school and then be impacted by COVID and not lose the momentum that the adults brought to the table? Because I imagine to myself that as an adult coming back to school, there's a lot of apprehension, there's a lot of worry, there's a lot of external factors that I'm facing. And then to have COVID happen, which took the wind out of everybody's sail and really reframed how all of us had to work. How were you able to survive that as a new center?
We lost several students. We would meet our students back in March 2 years ago and hand deliver our Chromebooks to those students. So because they didn't have devices at home. So we would check those out, hand deliver them. And our students had to learn how to use the Google Classroom platform. Our teachers had more or less 2 weeks to train themselves. But those folks that jumped on board did really, really well. As a matter of fact, when you take away the folks that just absolutely positively did not want to deal with trying the online route, we actually grew enrollment numbers wise during COVID because it became a convenient factor. They didn't have the issues of travel. They didn't have to worry about safety protocols. They could work a full job or help their kids in terms of tutoring because the kids were at home as well, and then do the classes when it worked for them. So there were a lot of advantages on that way, but we were also missing out on a lot of that interaction with the teacher and then the planning for the post-career. So we started phasing back into live instruction last spring. Our teachers came in. Almost all of our teachers said the same thing. They worked twice as hard online, but they were able to do it in their PJs. So then all of a sudden they're coming back. We're wearing our dress casual teaching clothes, and it was a challenge for us. We brought our students back in over the summer. And I'll be honest with you, Zach, when we went back to focusing on live instruction, we lost some of our students that wanted to continue online because they couldn't come in. And we're still dealing with that challenge right now. But the saving grace was when we opened our doors back up and, safety protocols were put in place and the students felt comfortable and safe here, we gained a lot of those folks that we lost 3 years ago that were scared to death of the computer. And this is their second home. I have students waiting outside the door 30 minutes before I open them. They're mad at me every time there's a snow day or there's a holiday. And, every Thursday they say, or Friday, they say, well, what are we going to do till next Monday? So, there's pros and cons. There's always challenges.
Our most successful students in person are not necessarily the same students as our most successful students who are online. I will say that we were very strategic when we moved to emergency distance learning to say, we are not going to try to have synchronous classes and live instruction. We already know all of our parents have their children at home who are doing that. We already know that a lot of our students struggle with a lot of basic access to basic, necessities. We can't assume that they have internet or have devices or have a quiet place to work. We don't want to go down this road. Our average daily attendance is not as high as what you see in public schools because there's no compulsion. It's all voluntary. So we looked at that and said, synchronous live instruction maybe is not going to go so well. Like if we have even more attendance problems, lower attendance, then we're just going to create more problems than we solve. So we made the decision to be fully asynchronous for that emergency distance learning scenario. And now as we're coming to a place where we're primarily back in person, and our legislation through Missouri does specify that we're a primarily in-person program. So we have to look at not only this need we didn't know about for students who might be more academically capable, but need the flexibility of some online learning, versus those who really need the structure and community of in-person learning, but also what are those restrictions? How do we move forward so that we're making an attempt to meet both sets of needs? So we've phased out that distance learning gradually, and we'll sort of shut it down and kind of completely end it temporarily. And when we start again next year, we'll still have some limited online offerings to meet some needs we can't meet in person, but not in the same way or to the same degree that we had done previously.
So you will have online for some offerings next year for those students who just can't do it any other way. And when it's online, is it flexible to where the kid can, or the learner can do it whenever they want to?
That's the way. So when we were in emergency distance learning, it was fully asynchronous. Assignments that counted for attendance were due at midnight. Most other assignments were also due at midnight. Next year, when we look at it, we may, move that to 24 hours from posting and expect posting at say 9 a.m. and the due date, the time it's due becomes 9 a.m. Because what we've really found is that having a midnight due date mostly means that our students just want to text us and get a response at midnight. And that maybe is not the healthiest thing. Like, does anybody care if you did it at 11:59 or 12:03 or 4:17?
Yeah, no one cares. But the
No one
fact that
cares, and nobody's looking for that. So
the
that's
instructors are always available, right?
There's some lessons learned around that, around how do we provide assessment opportunities that are proctored in such a way that we have more assurance that the student is the one who's really completing the work independently? How do we make sure that the students who are given the opportunity to take an additional class online have already made an adequate commitment to their own success in our program? How do we sort of adjust what we expect in terms of in-person attendance prior to being permitted to take online classes? Because we don't want new students to go straight into virtual classes and never become in-person students and never build those relationships with their teachers, their counselors, their classmates. And so we're spending some time this spring really examining what did we do in distance learning when it was an emergency situation that worked, and where can we make adjustments to make it more effective in the long term and be something that's sustainable for us as a supplement to our primary income rather than as an alternative because of this emergency situation.
And for anyone watching, if you have a question, now is the time to drop it in the chat so we can ask. My final question for you guys is this: what could be done to have more programs like this succeed? What could be done? If you think globally, I'm a native of Mississippi. I live in Georgia. Very few programs like this exist in either of those states that I'm aware of. What could be done to create more programs like this? Because the need is there. The benefit is clear. What can we do to do more of this and replicate it in more places?
Find a corporate sponsor that's brave enough to jump into waters that they've never jumped into before, because they know there's a missing link in terms of helping out workforce development. And that's easier said than done. We were incredibly lucky that we had a couple of folks in St. Louis that were brave enough to do that. But, there's numbers that would support that movement. So, for example, state of Mississippi, find out how many folks are in the state that are 21 years of age or older that don't have a diploma. Start there. We've done that here, and we've been able to break it down county by county across our 4 schools. In Missouri, for example, there are still 450,000 Missourians that don't have a diploma. In my county here in Boone County, we have 5,800 adults. And in 3 years, I've probably scratched the surface of somewhere around 400 to 500 adults. So we're barely scratching a huge hill, so to speak. So there's numbers out there that I would suggest people start with.
Absolutely. I think I would agree with that. And I also think it's worthwhile to find out whether or not the Goodwill organization in your area has had any interest in or is thinking about supporting opening a Goodwill Excel Center in their state. Goodwill is a federated system, right? So Missouri actually has 2. We're not the entire state. We also have like a little tiny pocket of Illinois, just as it happens. Our Goodwill organization contracted with the Goodwill Education Initiative in Indiana, who came with their expertise from when they started the program and have been incredibly supportive, worked with the lobbyist, worked with our CEO and board, helped us figure out what was going to be successful for us, helped us figure out what the potential funding options were. And it's really that way in all of the states. The next state that I think is set to open is Arizona. And I got an email from Indiana yesterday saying, hey, we don't really have a job description for your particular position because nobody else has your position in their Excel Center. Can you send us your job description so we can share that with Arizona? And yeah, absolutely, I can do that. So a lot of it is growing a little bit organically, but we also, like, we have a national conference. Indiana hosts a national conference for Excel centers every year. And one of the things they do is invite teams from Goodwill organizations who are interested in pursuing the opening of Excel centers in their local chapters in their areas. And so I think that there's a lot of opportunity through that Goodwill network to kind of get in there and say, like, no, what we want to support this. We want to find out if you're interested in this. We want to help you sell this. We want to make sure you're aware of this and use those resources that come through Goodwill International and the Goodwill Education Initiative to advantage in whatever state you're in, or like, we are hiring some people, just move to Missouri.
And so if you have a calling and a passion in your heart to do this work, just move to Missouri, or reach out to corporate partners, reach out to local Goodwill or headquarters for their state and find out like what they're doing and if there's a way that you can be a part and bring maybe something like this to your community. Mike and Dr. Hirsch, thank you guys both so much for joining me on the Zactivist Speaks. It is my hope that someone will see this or hear this and be motivated and inspired to do what you guys are doing to really expand our opportunities for our adults where education missed. And it's my hope, my genuine prayer, that one day in this country, I doubt that I live to see it or any of us watching will, but it's possible that there will come a day when no program like this is needed, because every single learner's need is met throughout the K-12 process. But until that day happens, until that day comes, we have programs like this that will meet the need. Thank you guys so much. And I'll see you guys back soon on the next Zactivist Speaks On.
Thank you.
Zach.